While Stuttgart was perfecting their evolutionary path and Munich was chasing electrification headlines, Modena was doing something nobody expected. The 2027 Maserati Grecale just fundamentally changed the luxury SUV game, and here's what makes this particularly interesting. The established players spent the last 3 years fighting yesterday's war, while Maserati quietly built tomorrow's weapon. Let me tell you what actually happened here, because the surface story isn't the real story. Every automotive journalist covering the Grecale's refresh focused on the obvious updates: the refined exterior, the updated interior tech, the powertrain options. They all missed what Maserati actually accomplished. This isn't another Italian attempt to chase German engineering. This is something entirely different, and it's already reshaping how informed buyers think about this segment. The luxury SUV market in 2027 has become predictable to the point of parody. You know the formula. German brands deliver precision and technology. British marques offer heritage and presence. The Americans provide space and power. Everyone stays in their lane. Everyone follows the established playbook. Maserati just threw that playbook into the Tyrrhenian Sea, and the fascinating part is how few people noticed it happening. Here's what they did. While Porsche was making the Macan more refined, while BMW was adding another variant to the X3 lineup, while Mercedes was cramming more screens into the GLC, Maserati was studying a different question entirely. Not how to compete with these vehicles, but why someone who could afford any of them would choose to drive the same thing as their neighbor, their business partner, their golf club members. The 2027 Grecale solves a problem that most manufacturers don't even acknowledge exists. Call it the invisibility paradox of luxury. You spend $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 on a vehicle, and you end up driving something that 3 other people in your office parking lot also own. The badge might be prestigious, but the experience has become common. Maserati understood something crucial about the buyer who's already owned the German options, already experienced what Munich and Stuttgart offer, and is looking for something that can't be replicated by simply writing a larger check to the same dealership. This is where the silent assassin concept becomes relevant, and I'm not using that phrase for dramatic effect. Think about what makes something truly dangerous in any competitive environment. It's not the loudest presence or the most obvious threat. It's the competitor that repositions the entire battlefield, while everyone else is still fighting over the same territory. The Grecale does this through a combination of decisions that seem small individually but create something genuinely distinctive when combined. Start with the powertrain strategy, because this is where most analysis goes wrong. The 2027 Grecale offers 3 powerplant options, and the smart money isn't necessarily on the flagship. The base GT model uses a 2.0-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder producing 296 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque. Nothing revolutionary there, but here's what matters. This engine, developed in conjunction with Stellantis engineering but tuned specifically for Maserati's requirements, delivers its power in a way that feels fundamentally different from the equivalent German 4-cylinders. The Germans tune for clinical precision and measurable performance metrics. 0 to 60 times. Fuel economy numbers. Emissions compliance. All entirely rational priorities. Maserati's engineers took a different approach with the GT's engine calibration. They optimize for what they call emotional responsiveness. Throttle mapping that prioritizes driver engagement over absolute efficiency. Exhaust note tuning that makes the 4-cylinder sound purposeful, rather than apologetic. Transmission programming that holds gears longer in dynamic driving because the experience matters more than the fuel economy readout. This sounds subtle, and it is subtle. That's precisely the point. The buyer who's already owned 3 or 4 German luxury vehicles doesn't need to be convinced that a turbocharged 4-cylinder can be efficient and quick. They already know that. What they haven't experienced in this segment is a 4-cylinder that makes them want to take the longer route home. That's the territory Maserati is claiming. Move up to the Modena trim with its 2.0-liter mild hybrid system, producing 325 horsepower, and you see the strategy become clearer. The 48-volt hybrid system isn't here primarily for fuel economy, though it does improve efficiency by roughly 11% in real-world driving. The hybrid system exists to eliminate turbo lag completely and to provide electric boost at precisely the moments when combustion engines traditionally feel hesitant. The result is throttle response that mimics naturally aspirated engines from the previous era, something that buyers in their 50s and 60s remember fondly from the vehicles that first made them fall in love with driving. Then there's the Trofeo, And this is where Maserati's approach becomes genuinely interesting from an engineering perspective. The 3.0-liter Nettuno V6, the same basic engine architecture that powers the MC20 supercar, produces 523 horsepower and 457 pound-feet of torque in the Grecale application. 0 to 60 miles per hour happens in 3.6 seconds. Top speed is electronically limited to 177 miles per hour. These numbers put it firmly in the conversation with the Porsche Macan Turbo, the BMW X3M competition, and the Mercedes-AMG GLC 63. But here's what the specification sheets don't tell you. The Nettuno engine was designed from the beginning as a high-performance power plant for mid-engine sports car applications. When Maserati adapted it for the Grecale, they didn't just detune it and call it done. They completely reworked the mounting system, the exhaust routing, and the intake configuration to maintain the engine's sporting character while accommodating SUV packaging requirements. The result is an SUV engine that revs with the enthusiasm of a sports car engine because fundamentally, that's what it is. The competition builds dedicated SUV engines and tunes them to feel sporting. Maserati installed a sports car engine and engineered around it. Different philosophy, different result. The Trofeo doesn't feel like a fast SUV trying to be a sports car. It feels like a sports car that happens to have the SUV practicality. For the buyer who remembers when performance meant naturally aspirated engines that rewarded being revved, this distinction matters enormously. Now let's talk about what Maserati did with the chassis, because this is where the silent assassin metaphor really crystallizes. The Grecale rides on a modified version of the Giorgio platform, the same basic architecture that underpins the Alfa Romeo Stelvio. On paper, this seems like a limitation. Shared platform, shared components, badge engineering concerns. But Maserati's chassis engineers understood something that gets lost in the platform sharing criticism. The Giorgio platform was designed from the beginning with near-perfect 50-50 weight distribution and a focus on dynamic handling that prioritizes driver engagement. It's actually one of the better starting points available for a performance-oriented SUV. What Maserati added was their interpretation of how that platform should behave at the limit and, more importantly, how it should communicate with the driver during everyday use. The 2027 Grecale features an updated version of Maserati's Skyhook adaptive suspension system. This isn't new technology. Skyhook has been around for years. What's new is how Maserati has calibrated it for the current generation of buyers. The system offers 4 driving modes: Comfort, GT, Sport, and Corsa for the Trofeo. Most manufacturers offer similar mode selections. What differentiates the Grecale is how much actual difference exists between these modes. In Comfort mode, the Grecale rides with a suppleness that would satisfy buyers coming from traditional luxury settings. Road irregularities get absorbed without the busy, over-damped feeling that many German SUVs exhibit when their adaptive systems are set to comfort. The steering weight lightens to reduce effort during parking and low-speed maneuvering. The throttle response becomes more gradual. The transmission shifts earlier and more frequently to prioritize smoothness. Switch to Sport mode, and the transformation is dramatic enough that you'd swear you're driving a different vehicle. The dampers stiffen substantially. The steering weight increases by roughly 30%, and the ratio quickens slightly through active steering intervention. The throttle mapping becomes aggressive enough that you need to recalibrate your right foot's muscle memory. The transmission holds gears to redline and executes downshifts with a mechanical aggression that borders on violent. This is the crucial difference. German manufacturers calibrate their driving modes to offer noticeable but moderate differences between settings, because their market research suggests buyers want versatility without compromise. Maserati calibrated for maximum distinction between modes because they're targeting the buyer who wants one vehicle that can genuinely be 2 different things depending on context. The executive who needs comfort for the Tuesday morning commute and sport for the Saturday morning canyon drive. Here's what that actually means in practice. The typical Macan or X3M owner eventually settles on one driving mode and rarely changes it because the differences between modes are incremental enough that the hassle of switching doesn't justify the benefit. The Grecale owner actively uses different modes for different purposes because the vehicle's character genuinely transforms. That's a subtle distinction with major implications for ownership satisfaction over time. The interior is where Maserati's design philosophy diverges most dramatically from German convention, and it's where you really see the Italian approach to luxury. German luxury is about perceived quality through precision. Panel gaps measured in micrometers. Switchgear that operates with mechanical perfection. Materials selected for durability and long-term wear resistance. This is luxury as engineering achievement. Italian luxury, at least the way Maserati interprets it, is about sensory richness and emotional resonance. The 2027 Grecale's cabin uses materials selected as much for how they feel and smell as for how they perform in long-term durability testing. The leather has a grain and a scent that announce its presence. The metal switchgear has weight and mechanical feedback that feels deliberate rather than optimized. The wood trim is actual wood with visible grain variation, not perfectly uniform veneer. This creates an interior environment that feels hand-assembled rather than manufactured, even though modern production reality means both approaches involve significant automation. But the perception matters, especially to buyers who remember when luxury cars actually were hand-assembled, and who associate that era with a kind of automotive experience that's largely disappeared from the modern market. The technology integration reveals Maserati's understanding of their demographic in ways that most manufacturers miss. The 2027 Grecale features a 12.3-inch digital instrument cluster and a 14.1-inch central touchscreen. These are large displays by any measure, competitive with anything from Germany or America. But Maserati's approach to the user interface is notably different from the screen-centric philosophy that dominates the luxury segment. The Germans are moving toward interfaces where nearly every function routes through touchscreen menus. Physical buttons are disappearing in favor of haptic surfaces and voice commands. This makes sense if your primary customer is 35 years old and grew up with smartphones. But Maserati's customer is more likely to be 55 and remembers when interacting with a car meant turning knobs and pressing buttons, not navigating through menu hierarchies while driving. The Grecale retains physical controls for climate functions, driving mode selection, and audio volume. These aren't token gestures toward tradition. They're genuinely useful interfaces that allow the driver to make adjustments without looking away from the road or interrupting a conversation. The touchscreen handles navigation, media selection, and vehicle settings that don't require frequent adjustment. It's a hybrid approach that respects both modern capability and human factors engineering. The sound system deserves specific mention because it illustrates Maserati's priorities beautifully. The available Sonos Faber audio system, developed specifically for the Grecale, features 14 speakers and an 860-watt amplifier. The specification is competitive, but not class-leading. You can get more speakers and more watts from German competitors. But Sonos Faber is an Italian company with decades of experience building high-end home audio equipment, and their approach to automotive audio prioritizes musicality over measurable output. What this means practically is that the Grecale's audio system sounds more natural and less fatiguing during extended listening compared to systems that prioritize maximum output and bass response. For the buyer who actually listens to music rather than using the audio system as background noise, this distinction is significant. It's another example of Maserati making decisions based on actual use patterns of their target customer, rather than specification sheet comparisons. Now, let's address the market positioning question, because this is where the silent assassin strategy becomes most apparent. The 2027 Grecale GT starts at approximately $68,000. The Modena begins around $78,000. The Trofeo commands roughly $96,000. These prices position the Grecale below equivalent Porsche Macan models, roughly equal to BMW X 3M variants, and above comparably equipped Mercedes-AMG GLC models. This pricing isn't accidental. Maserati could position the Grecale higher and pursue exclusivity through scarcity and prestige pricing. That's what brands like Bentley and Aston Martin do with their SUV offerings. Or they could price aggressively below the German competition and compete on value, the strategy that worked for Genesis and Lexus in previous decades. Instead, they've chosen a middle path that's more sophisticated than it initially appears. By pricing the Grecale at rough parity with German alternatives, Maserati forces a direct comparison based on character and experience rather than value or exclusivity. The buyer who's considering a Macan Turbo and a Grecale Trofeo is making a decision about what kind of driving experience they prefer, not whether they can afford the premium or accept the compromise. This is exactly where Maserati wants the conversation to happen, because character and experience are battles they can win against competitors who've optimized for different priorities. The buyer profile for the Grecale is surprisingly specific, and Maserati's product planning team clearly understands this. The typical customer is not purchasing their first luxury vehicle. They're likely on their fourth, fifth, or sixth premium car. They've owned the German options, possibly multiple times. They appreciate what Munich and Stuttgart deliver, but have become somewhat fatigued by the sameness of the experience. They want something that feels special without being impractical or unreliable. This customer is typically between 45 and 65 years old, professionally successful, and no longer particularly concerned with what vehicle choices signal to peers or colleagues. The psychological shift that happens somewhere in middle age, where external validation becomes less important than personal satisfaction, is central to the Grecale's appeal. This is a vehicle for someone confident enough to choose based on what they actually enjoy rather than what the market consensus suggests they should drive. Geographically, the Grecale's appeal splits interestingly. In the United States, it attracts buyers who want European dynamics without the prevalence of German SUVs in every affluent suburb. There's a certain satisfaction in driving something that requires explanation, something that isn't immediately identifiable to everyone at the stoplight. In Germany, it appeals to buyers who appreciate Italian design and character, but need the practicality that an SUV provides. In the UK, it captures buyers looking for something more emotionally engaging than the Range Rover options that dominate the luxury SUV market there. In Italy and Poland, the appeal is more straightforward. National pride plays a role. There's satisfaction in supporting an Italian manufacturer, particularly one with Maserati's racing heritage and connection to brands like Ferrari. But even in these markets, the Grecale needs to justify itself on merit beyond patriotism, and the vehicle delivers enough substance to do so. The ownership experience reveals another dimension of Maserati's strategy. Depreciation on Italian luxury vehicles has historically been steeper than German equivalents, and that pattern will likely continue with the Grecale. A 3-year-old Grecale will probably be worth less than a 3-year-old Macan with similar mileage. For the buyer who trades vehicles every few years, this is a meaningful economic consideration. But here's the counter-argument that Maserati is implicitly making. If you're choosing a vehicle based primarily on projected resale value, you're optimizing for the wrong variable. The point of owning a car like the Grecale isn't to minimize depreciation. It's to maximize the satisfaction of the driving experience during the ownership period. The buyer who keeps the Grecale for 7 or 8 years, who drives it enthusiastically and maintains it properly, isn't particularly concerned with whether it retains 60% or 55% of its value. This is a vehicle that rewards commitment and punishes speculation. The 3-year lease customer will probably be better served by German alternatives that optimize for that ownership pattern. The long-term keeper who actually drives the car will likely find the Grecale more satisfying over time. Maserati has made peace with this reality rather than trying to engineer around it. The reliability question inevitably arises because Maserati's historical reputation in this area has been mixed at best. Italian exotic cars have traditionally prioritized performance and emotion over absolute dependability. But the 2027 Grecale benefits from Stellantis ownership and the engineering resources that come with being part of a global automotive conglomerate. The powertrains are proven units with extensive development history. The platform is shared with Alfa Romeo, which has significantly improved its reliability metrics in recent years. Real-world ownership reports from the first-generation Grecale, launched in 2022, show reliability that's competitive with German alternatives, though not quite at the level of Japanese luxury brands. The 2027 refresh hasn't been in customer hands long enough for meaningful reliability data, but there's no reason to expect significant deviation from the established pattern. This is good enough for the target customer, who prioritizes driving engagement over absolute peace of mind. Maintenance costs are higher than mass-market brands but comparable to other vehicles in this segment. The annual service intervals are reasonable at roughly 10,000 miles or 1 year. Parts availability has improved significantly compared to Maserati's history, thanks to Stellantis' distribution network. You're not going to confuse the ownership costs with a Toyota, but neither are you signing up for the financial commitment that comes with truly exotic machinery. The technology features deserve deeper examination because they reveal how Maserati balances innovation with usability for their demographic. The Grecale offers Level 2 autonomous driving capability through a comprehensive suite of sensors and cameras, adaptive cruise control with stop-and-go functionality, lane keeping assist, automatic emergency braking, blind spot monitoring, the full complement of driver assistance features that have become expected in this segment. What's notable is how these systems are calibrated and presented. Many manufacturers tune their driver assistance systems aggressively, with lane keeping that tugs at the steering wheel and collision avoidance that brakes sharply at perceived threats. This prioritizes absolute safety at the cost of driver confidence and control. Maserati's calibration is more subtle. The systems provide warnings and gentle interventions rather than taking aggressive action. This respects the driver's ability and maintains engagement rather than creating a partially autonomous experience. The infotainment system runs on Android Automotive, which provides integration with Google services and a robust app ecosystem. This is the same basic platform that Volvo, Polestar, and other manufacturers are adopting. But Maserati's implementation includes custom graphics and interface design that maintains brand identity while leveraging the platform's capabilities. You get the functional benefits of a mature software ecosystem without feeling like you're driving a Google product. The smartphone integration is comprehensive, with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. The wireless charging pad actually works reliably, unlike some implementations that struggle with phone positioning. The digital key functionality allows you to unlock and start the vehicle using your smartphone, which sounds like a gimmick until you actually use it and realize you can leave the key fob at home. For the professional who's already carrying a phone everywhere, this is genuinely convenient. The competing vehicles need to be addressed directly because the Grecale doesn't exist in a vacuum. The Porsche Macan, particularly in Turbo and GTS variants, remains the dynamic benchmark in this segment. It's the vehicle that established the template for a truly sporting luxury SUV. The Macan delivers handling precision and chassis balance that borders on uncanny for a vehicle of this type. If your priority is absolute dynamic capability and you're less concerned with character or uniqueness, the Macan is still the rational choice. The BMW X3M competition brings straight-line performance that embarrasses sports cars from previous generations. 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds from an SUV was fantasy a decade ago. Now it's achievable from a practical family vehicle. The X3M's powertrain is a masterpiece of forced induction engineering. If maximum performance and that particular brand of BMW precision appeal to you, it's an excellent choice that will never embarrass you. The Mercedes-AMG GLC 63, particularly in the outgoing generation, offered a rumbling V8 soundtrack and the kind of low-end torque that makes everyday driving effortless. The new generation has moved to a turbocharged 4-cylinder with electric boost, which is more efficient but less characterful. This illustrates the broader trend in the segment. Everyone's moving toward electrification and efficiency. The Grecale is one of the last opportunities to own a naturally aspirated 6-cylinder performance SUV before regulations and market forces make such engines extinct. The Alfa Romeo Stelvio Quadrifoglio shares a platform with the Grecale, but takes a different approach to performance. It's lighter, more aggressive, and less refined. The Stelvio is for the buyer who wants maximum dynamic engagement and accepts the compromises that come with that focus. The Grecale is for the buyer who wants most of that engagement with more comfort and luxury. It's a question of priority, not superiority. What none of these competitors offer is the specific combination of Italian character, emotional powertrain options, and distinctive design that defines the Grecale. That's not a claim that the Grecale is objectively better. It's a recognition that Maserati has identified and served the customer need that the established players either don't recognize or choose not to prioritize.